Hi everyone, good morning. Welcome to another one of our Luxury Club webinars here. Once again, you've got me and Andy talking to you today about audience and what audience means in the age of automations, algorithms and machine learning. So I think a really timely topic as Performance Max and Advantage Plus become kind of go-to campaigns for a lot of e-commerce directors and performance marketers. Just a couple of housekeeping things. As usual, we're here for 30 minutes and we'll try and stay as close to 30 minutes as we can. But if we do run over by a few minutes, we're really sorry. Obviously, we always have a lot to catch up on and to squeeze into that 30-minute slot. As always, if you've got any questions, please post in the comments. We'll try and answer them live if we can. And if we can't, then we will come back to you at the end, either via LinkedIn or via email if you want to leave your contact details in the comments. And anyone that's registered, if you can't join us live, then we'll be sending the recording out to you as well so that you don't miss out. Perfect. Andy, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, we certainly can. Morning, everyone. Let's start with a definition, because we're going to move into a sequence, maybe not too much detail today, maybe a little bit of detail in terms of artificial intelligence and how automation helps in a separate sequence. But today is focusing on the sort of audience side of it. But I think it's worth sometimes taking a bit of a step back and just looking at what do we mean by audience, because I think sometimes brands that I speak to tend to get a little not confused, but wrapped up in many different aspects in terms of building personas and this and the other, and kind of forget the real definition. So let's start with the definition. So an audience refers to a group of people who receive or are intended to receive a message, presentation, performance, or other form of communication. They are typically spectators, listeners, or readers who are addressed or entertained by a speaker, performer, author, or content creator. The audience can vary widely in size, demographics, interests, and characteristics. And understanding the audience is crucial for effective communication, as it helps tailor the message to meet their needs, expectations, and preferences. So I think first things first for the listeners or watchers is just to have a think about that, and just make sure that prior to going into any sort of audience or automation that's connected to audiences, that they fully understand what the purpose of building that audience is to start with. The other thing, last quick thing on this, is audience should be grouped into two separate segments before you get to the persona stage. The audience that already is within your first party data, so your customers basically, and then those that aren't, and therefore the ones that you want to be customers. So let's call that existing customers and future customers. With the existing customer side of it, quite often brands miss the basic stuff that almost doesn't require automation to start with, which is things like the RFM technique, which we talk about quite a lot, which is looking at your customers and dividing them into recency, frequency, and monetization. So how many people buy in the last X period of time? What's the value of those purchases? And how soon were they? So the idea being is if someone's bought lots of things in the last 30, 40 days and they're all high value, then they sit in the sort of top echelon of your mindset. And the reason why it's important to start there is because that almost informs your persona research, your identification, because it'll show who your current customers are and where you get the money from, essentially the higher value of those, and therefore it makes it much more easier to project that forward into customers that are future customers.
I think that definition is really interesting, and maybe something that as marketers we might forget or brush over, especially when we're looking at upper funnel or that brand building side of our campaigns, is that the audience is absolutely anyone that has a likelihood of consuming any of your content. And actually, we might not have as much control over that as what we think. So especially now when, as you say, data privacy laws have meant that targeting is much more difficult, manual targeting is much more difficult. So actually, when we're thinking about audience, your audience is everyone. And then I suppose in my mind, it's up to the creative and the messaging to be able to narrow down the audience into customers or likely customers. And I think sometimes that we forget as marketers that your audience, or the audience in the grand scale of things, is not a very tiny demographic, a very tiny market. It's actually a lot broader than what we think. And it's up to us and our marketing strategies to actually be able to dial that down into people that are likely to purchase.
Yeah, absolutely. You make a good point there, really. As marketeers, our job is to tell stories. And you can't really get to that point unless you've identified the audience, because, the audience that you tell to your higher value segment of your existing database to attract a future version of those customers will probably be quite different than maybe the story that you tell people that buy a more, say, lower value or more frequent part of your sort of SKU list, as it were. But the story thing is an interesting one. It's something that it's because it's what we do as an agency course, but every single sort of angle of these webinars that we take always comes back to story, because everything has to lead there, because that's ultimately how we sort of scale businesses. But so I think that's valuable. The other thing, probably just to take a bit of a step back before we get into the sort of automation side, is to have a little think about audience in terms of particularly the new audience, is the visibility and the reducing visibility of that audience in 2024. So certainly for the listeners, they should be aware of the depreciation of the third-party cookie. If not already happening in your brand, it is being phased out by the last purveyor of that, which is Google, over 2024. So if you've not, over the last couple of years, seen a decline in the volume of data that you can see, and therefore meaningfully use, then you will start to see that across 2024. The solution to that, which is really only a partial solution, is looking at a server-to-server tracking option, which will give you first-party data. Now, that's not going to complete the solution, and that connects me to the next point, which is the consent mode v2 update, which was, I think it was the 8th of March, or was it 10th of March? I can't remember, earlier this month, basically, where Google has been, by the European authorities for privacy, have been almost forced into connecting your cookie pop-up process on your website directly to the ad platforms. So that if somebody on your site says, no, I don't want to be tracked in any way, shape or form by any cookie, whether it's first party or third, what should happen is that data is automatically removed from ad platforms, for example, Google Ads. So if anybody's listening to this and hasn't looked into a server-to-server tracking solution, or isn't aware of Google Consent Mode v2 and how to implement it, then ask their agencies or drop us a note on LinkedIn, and we'll point you in the right direction, because the European authority are pressing it fairly hard, and you need to have something in place to sort that out. But the reason for mentioning that and how it links into the topic today, which is automation and audience, is you can't really automate necessarily to what you can't see. So there's still quite a lot of legwork that brands need to do with their existing data, particularly before they can even worry about automation.
Cool. So taking a look then at the ad platforms specifically and the magical world of algorithms, obviously, as I mentioned before, Google Performance Max and Meta Advantage Plus have removed, so to speak, the necessity for us to do a lot of manual targeting, because we're no longer able to, because of the privacy. So everything kind of domino effects from one to another. How can we still use audiences or our current audience data efficiently if the platforms are going to be doing the, so to speak, targeting for us? Now, I already know the answer to this question from a meta perspective,
Go for it.
Which would be obviously Advantage Plus using data based on your current customers to be able to seek out those with similar behaviors. So they can identify who's most likely to purchase. So uploading customer lists directly into the ad platform, allows Meta to kind of, analyze and extrapolate that data so that it can then go ahead and serve people with similar attributes. So that's kind of one way. Andy, do you have any light that you might be able to shed from a Performance Max perspective in terms of how that might work and how we can still be using this audience data to really fuel these algorithms that seem to take away kind of the manual nature of audience targeting?
Yeah, in a similar way, you can upload audience lists into Google and use those in a very sort of similar matched type way. A top tip for Google Ads generally, but particularly for PMax, and we'll come on to the automation side of that. I think we've done a previous webinar on the automation on PMax. I won't go into too much detail on it. Just look that up on our website. But what you can actually do is Google are working on a much closer connection with GA4 and Google Ads. I'll come on to what they've released just this week, actually, on terms of some of the metrics that they're changing. But what you can actually do, and I'll come back onto how first-party data will impact this, but what you can actually do is build an audience list up within GA4 under the Tech and Audiences tab. And that audience can be a custom audience based on any events or any parameters that you include. So, for example, what you could do is a very simple implementation of this is you could say anybody that's purchased anything, I want to build that audience up within GA4. Anybody that's visited a certain page, anybody that's added to basket, any custom events that you set up within GA4, you can build an audience from those as well. Now, that's not massively dissimilar to what was in GA3, but in GA4, you can actually push that audience into Google Ads. And then you can include that in PMax, or you can include that in your general search campaigns or anything else. And you can essentially say, as part of this campaign, I want you to prioritize targeting these people that have reached this particular point in the journey that matters for your brand, as I said, whether it's add to basket or whatever else it may be. The looping back to first party, that if you're still relying on third party data, those audiences will be tiny because you can't see the data as voluminous. If you so just to clarify that, if you're using third party tracking, which is a legacy system, so if you haven't changed it, you will be using third party tracking. What basically will be happening is that irrespective of whether anybody denies the cookies on your site or accepts them, you won't see them because the browser blocks that. If you've migrated to a first-party data tracking solution, which includes server-to-server tracking, then what can happen is, on the assumption that people have accepted the cookies, or you cleverly phrase the cookies to say, these are the essential items, and you can deny the non-essential items, you'll see a lot of that. So people are getting around it by terminology, which is clever. I may or may not endorse that, but you will see a bigger data pot if you use first-party tracking, because you're seeing a bigger pot of those people. So that's part of what is kind of happening. The other interesting thing is that when you're using a higher volume of data, the likes of PMax, which is the automation side of Google Ads, will work a lot better because you're feeding it data and information that's much more accurate and much easier. The other thing is, from an automation point of view, it kind of sits under the automation banner, is using enhanced conversions through Google Ads. Now, this is an additional setup that needs to take place. It's either that there's a tick box that needs to happen on the Google Ads platform, but implementation is normally through Google Tag Manager, and there's some further steps that need to take place there. But what enhanced conversion allows you to do, it's not necessarily a new thing, but still lots of people don't use it, is it takes hashed information from the purchase process automatically, and it's hashed because of GDPR compliance, of course, and it takes information such as name and email address primarily, and what it does is it matches that email address that people have started the basket journey or completed it, and it matches it with the Google database. So if that person has a Gmail account or is signed into any part of the Gmail network, it can provide tracking to that particular person and then use lookalike audiences to try and replicate that. So if the person that's signed into Gmail visited site A, B, C, and D, and Google can see, actually, I can see 1,000 other journeys that have also followed that similar pattern but may not be signed in, it can start to predict those paths and those audiences. So Automation doesn't necessarily need to mean AI, although that is an important part of it. It just means how do you sequence things automatically without you having to manually do things, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, so we have the ability on both Meta and Performance Max to be able to upload and tailor those custom audiences. Now, we know as e-commerce marketers how multi-channel people's journeys are and purchase journeys, and how people consume content is across lots of different platforms at once. Is there an ability to be able to cross that data over? So, for instance, if we know that somebody has viewed or interacted with our Meta campaigns, is there a way of being able to use that audience within Google?
Yeah, so a really top trick on that is if you use, which everybody should be anyway, use the UTM tracking parameters within the Meta system when you set your Meta campaign up. You can set an audience up based on URL parameters in GA4. So what we do in some of the campaigns that we set up is we set the UTM parameters up with the parameter that can be read in GA4, then go into the audiences and build an audience list based on people that have visited the website containing that UTM parameter. And obviously mindful of the whole first party data tracking we just discussed. Then that list gets built up and you can send that list into Google Ads. So what you can start to do, and again, going back to storytelling, is you can start to use Meta as your introducer into the storytelling funnel and continue that conversation with a more storytelling or sales focused messaging within the Google Ads platform. And that works pretty well in the data that we can see. So as a top tip, and again, all of that is doesn't require any sort of attribution system, which we'll probably get onto shortly maybe, but it doesn't require any of that. It's just a simple setup within making sure within the Meta ad platform that you've got the UTM parameters installed. If you haven't, they're free. There's a UTM creator, Google provided, so you can add it in very easily, very quickly. And then it's just a case of setting an audience up with the parameter look for, source equals Meta. It could be something as SRC equals Meta, for example. That list builds up over time, and then that's then fed into Google Ads, and you put a separate campaign that's knowing where that traffic has come from. So that's quite important. Set a separate campaign up for that, because otherwise it just sort of filters into all the rest of the ads. But and what I mean by that is set a separate search campaign or a PMAX campaign with assets that are specifically designed to continue the story. So what do I mean by that? So a build type ad is much more, stop you in your tracks. It's much more aspirational. It's something that catches the attention. Very rarely talks about product. It normally positions product in a setting with somebody doing something that resonates with your target audience that we just discussed how we build that. When it then sequences through into Google Ads, a storytelling ad is much more maybe talking about the materials, or is it handmade, or all these other people like the product as well, so you'll like it too. So maybe UGC videos or something like that starts to become part of the storytelling layer, and then the sell bit is just here's the ad, but no discount message, no free shipping, no discounting. We work mainly with luxury clients, and we're constantly saying no discounting. If you get the storytelling and audience targeting correct, there should be, in time, not immediately, but in time, no need to attract new customers with a message of discount.
I think that's really powerful, just going back a couple of steps from what you mentioned in terms of uploading those UTM parameters and all of those audiences into other platforms, because as you mentioned before, the higher volume and the higher quality of data that you're able to feed the algorithms, the more efficiently they can work, the more cost effective they become, and the higher those conversions. And I think we both use the analogy that you wouldn't fill a Ferrari with cheap fuel. So it's about getting kind of as much high quality data as you can, whether that's from your current customer base or whether it's from other platforms where you know that the engagement on your ads is really high and people are likely to convert, and using that to then almost train these algorithms in an automated way, so that the legwork for us as marketers isn't huge. And as Andy mentioned before, there's loads of new features in GA4 that allow you to automate as much as you can that process. And then those algorithms are just going to continue to optimize and continue to kind of work for you and your brand to essentially build a wider audience is what we want. We talk all the time about how you can't continue to sell more to the same people. So in order for e-commerce and especially luxury brands to grow, it's about widening your audience, generating demand and creating a wider pool of people that are going to see value in your products through all of these different avenues, to the point where they don't need to be enticed by a discount to purchase. You want people buying full price. And I think there's so many different ways from a platform perspective that you can really optimize that to work the best it can and to work really hard. But in the last 10 minutes, I just wanted to quickly talk or pose the question to you, Andy, in terms of how we should be using audiences from a messaging perspective, if there wasn't anything else that you wanted to add on that previous kind of data point.
Yeah, just the last quick thing to add, really luxury particularly, but any brand really that's selling something, but particularly focused just because it's what we do, live and breathe every day, really you should sell through your brand story, not through your price. And in most cases that we see, when brands want to grow, the first thing they look at is price. And they have a £500 average order value product, and they think, well, wonder if we just drop that to £400, what we've noticed is more people buy it. Or if we give 50% off and it's a £200 product, that most people buy it. The problem with that strategy is it's what I call short-termism, which it will spike revenue in the short term, but it harms the brand in the long term. And I'm not talking about depreciating the value of the brand, it's lowering the tone. What I mean is that you've just acquired a lower value customer that will only be a future customer if you return your prices to £200. What you want to recruit is your £400 customer at your maximum margin and bring more of those on board. And the only way to do that is to abandon free shipping, abandon discounts, and focus purely on, does your story get told in a way, get told at all, but then get told in a way that attracts a £400 customer and not a £200 customer. And the other thing is that automation is lazy. For example, if you either Meta from a Advantage Plus point of view or a PMax point of view, they will find the quickest route to the sea. It's a bit like a river. If you leave the ability for them to target your brand terms in PMax, for example, your PMax will go after brand. If you leave it the sole ability to target the shopping feed, it'll go after the shopping feed, and it'll ignore the targeting of new customers. So you have to be bold in a sense that you focus particularly on a campaign that uses automation that denies almost the ability to target those easier, lower hanging fruit. You should force it to go after and deliver your brand story. You should have ads in the upper funnel. You should have ads in which we call build, storytell, and sell. You should have ads in the build that engage the £400, £500 customer, not the £100, £200 customer, and that tell the story that would motivate your target audience, and then sell to them by just displaying product. Position nicely, let the product do the selling at that stage, not the price. And by that point, you'll have sequenced everyone down to the bottom. So just bear in mind that automation is lazy. If you just set up an Advantage Plus campaign and let it roll, it might give you a good ROAS, but it's not focusing on the future growth of the brand.
Yeah, I think, and it's something that I talk about quite a lot, and there's been a lot of research on it in terms of like price sensitivity. And actually, the higher your brand reputation, there is a decrease in price sensitivity amongst audiences. So obviously larger, well-established brands are going to be at an advantage in terms of being able to increase their prices or charge more because there's a certain reputation. The way to be able to build that reputation is going to be through tapping into an audience with a brand story. And that's probably a conversation for another day. Because it's a whole kind of field of its own, but it's something that we feel really strongly about in terms of, gathering new audiences that will always pay full price. And that's something that automation, unfortunately, is not the best at doing, because as Andy mentioned, it's going to go after those quick wins, and it's on a very short term kind of ROAS based goal. And we know that a longer term strategy is going to yield the best results in the long term, but it's not a tap that you can turn on and you're going to immediately see results. But what automation and those algorithm driven campaigns do is find those people that you may not be able to target manually that are already in the market. So I think that is one of the positives, is that it can kind of, for want of a better phrase, get all of the low hanging fruit. But there's still work that we need to do outside of automation and outside of algorithms and machine learning and all of that kind of stuff to be able to make sure that there is a long-term strategy in place.
Yeah, AI and the automation side, it does the heavy lifting. As marketeers and storytellers, our input from our brains and from our collective team's brains are really what drive the automation, what drive the AI, or use that successfully. It's not at a stage where you just click your fingers and AI will produce the perfect campaign. I've given you two examples in PMAX and Advantage Plus where it will find the easiest route, which is not what you're trying to achieve. You've got to sell more to new, not more to the same. Last quick thing, I'm just conscious of time. I've given you one example of how to start this. Try not to think of this as, wow, how do we start this? You can actually run an automated campaign that does the sort of job, ticks the box of selling through your brand story within Meta, for example. So we do this sort of small test called the Revenue Growth Accelerator, where we set up a very, very simple build, storytell, and sell framework within Meta and report within Meta. So nobody leaves. And it allows us a very quick, very inexpensive way of testing a variety of sequences of stories very quickly and very inexpensively. And then we lead with a bigger campaign with the wider story. So do that. Ask us some questions about the Revenue Growth Accelerator. I'm sure we can share some information in the notes below. But the other thing is, try that audience building within GA4. So get your UTM tracking in place with Meta, and then watch the flow of traffic from Meta through GA4 and then back into Google Ads, and just monitor that. That's the next step. So do a full funnel activity to sell in your brand story, high order value people. Use the automation, but exclude anybody that's been to your Facebook page, been to your website in the last 180 days, and anybody that knows you. Run that test. Once you've done that and you want to see what the cross-channel impact is, then test 2 will be build that audience list and then fire it straight into GA4 and run the two things together and see what the collective impact is on revenue growth.
Cool. So we've got a few minutes. So there is something that I do just want to tag on to the end of that. You mentioned it briefly, Andy, and that's to do with testing. Obviously, any algorithm-driven campaign like we do with Advantage Plus is a really powerful tool in terms of testing. So if we were to take kind of a step back and think, right, we've done some research on this audience. Maybe we've come up with a couple of different personas based on, you know, the RFM framework, or maybe who we want to target if you're looking to branch out to a wider audience. And then from that step, you've come up with, you know, some new messaging or some new creative. Maybe you're not quite sure what's going to resonate with the best people. Using something like Advantage Plus or like an automated campaign is such a good tool at being able to really quickly assess what messaging is going to resonate with your existing or with new customers. So don't think that it's something that you can just use once you've got all of your creative sorted or all of your campaigns sorted. It's something that can be used much earlier in that campaign building process. Very inexpensive. You don't need tons of cash behind it. Put together a really small test with all of your different messaging and all of your different creative that maybe you're thinking about. You might want to go down this direction for your brand story, but you're not sure whether, you know, a sustainable led story or like a legacy heritage story or a humor story. You're not sure which one will resonate. Chuck them all in. See which ones perform the best, not necessarily from ROAS, but in terms of engagement or click-through rate. and then use that to then tailor your decision making, because then it's fueled by data, and it takes away that bias that we have as marketers or as people to be like, I don't like it, I don't like what it looks like, or I don't like what it sounds like, because at the end of the day, as marketers, we are never going to be our ideal audience, because we are too biased to the product and we're ttoo biased to the process. We know how it works, so we're never going to be a true representation of an audience. So use Advantage Plus or PMax, or one of those automated campaigns to test your messaging, to see what's going to resonate with your audience, and then use that going forward to then make that campaign bigger, and then pull it across different platforms. And I think that's a really good way that you can also get started.
Yeah, and then last top tip following on from that is volume of ads. So a lot of the time when we're auditing Meta accounts particularly, we see sort of 3 creatives, and it's just simply not enough to test what's going to work. We need 5 to 10 as a minimum, and actually we need 5 to 10 as a minimum at each stage of the funnel. So really you need 5 to 10 build ads, 5 to 10 storytell ads, and at least 5 to 10 sell ads at the base to convert the traffic. The other quick tip, so the things that I noticed that people don't do when they're looking to scale revenue, is that one, that they're not testing enough creative, not testing enough campaigns, and not just in Meta but across multiple channels, Google Ads included. The second thing is that they are relying too much on automation, and the automation relies too much on the bottom of the funnel. It doesn't use or position enough further up the funnel. And the second thing is that the ads that they do have, the assets that they are using in the ads don't sequence people through from an awareness ad to a storytell ad to a sell ad. If at best, I'd say 90% of the accounts that we audit are all bottom funnel. They're all selling product. They've got carousels with product and everything else. They don't have anything in the storytelling. They don't have anything in the build. At best, they have a load of sell ads and they have a build ad, one video. And there's a big disconnect between someone seeing the video that is your high net worth target audience, and they go, oh, that's interesting. And then it's kind of like, where's the brand gone? And the next minute it's like, I want you to buy this dress for £500. It's like, sorry, I'm not with you yet. I'm not there yet. So that storytell section is missed, and it's really easy to test. Most of the time, as you'll know, Danielle, you get involved with a lot of the creative for a lot of tests that we do for clients. It's already there in the business. In most cases, it's not as if you need to run a fancy photo shoot. So yeah, just a few last quick tips there of just observations more than anything else.
Yeah, a lot of it's already in your organic content, so have a skim through your own Instagram page to find some inspiration, because it is normally already there. Perfect. Well, we've come to the end of the 30 minutes. That's been a really kind of whistle-stop tour, I guess, on a lot of different topics. We've not dived into anything really deep, so if you want any more information about anything really that we've touched upon today, then get in touch with either myself or with Andy, either via LinkedIn or via our email, or you can email the whole team at info@revenuegrowth.agency. DM us on LinkedIn. There's loads of ways you can get in touch with us if you do want any more in-depth information. And yeah, as I say, we'll always be sending out the recordings, and have a nice Easter or happy holidays. And we'll see you next month, where we will be talking a little bit more about AI and AI within marketing. So stay tuned. Thanks, guys. See you later.
See you later.